All right.
Awesome. Thank you, Holly. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Hospital for Special Care Joy of Art Juried Art Exhibition. I'm Olivia Reed, the co-chair of the Joy of Art Committee and also the Volunteer Services and Community Relations Coordinator at Hospital for Special Care. On behalf of myself, Holly Randall, the co-chair of the Joy of Art Committee, and our Joy of Art Committee volunteers, Ellen is here with us, and Jan Hassenegger, Bob is with us, Luke Boulette, and Judy is also here with us. We want to welcome you all and thank you for joining us this evening. We could really all appreciate art. While the in-person exhibit is not open for public viewing, it is really truly enjoyed and appreciated by all who walk through the hallways, our patients, families, and staff. A quote that I had read from Ossie Davis and Jean Noble's Beautiful is, any form of art is a form of power. It has impact. It can affect change. It can not only move us, it makes us move. Art really plays a powerful role in healing, rebuilding, and creating joy. It helps to create a warm and inviting environment that is therapeutic for everyone. We can share happiness with one another and build a sense of togetherness through art. Before I welcome our juror, I want to ask everyone who's in attendance to please sign our guest book, which is just in the chat. Let us know how you heard about the Joy of Art, Juried Art Exhibition, and please feel free to write any questions, comments in the chat. In addition, we'll have time at the end of the show for questions and comments. I am pleased to welcome and introduce Bernadine Franco as the juror for the Joy of Art Juried Art Exhibition. Bernadine Franco is an educator fascinated by the influence of women artists on the story of art. She engages the public with female visual artists defined through works that expose the astonishing beauty of women's lives and empower the female perspective. Her media includes teaching, writing, speaking in person and through Beyond the Paint with Bernadine podcast, and designing tours at local museums. Bernadine has received her Bachelor of Arts in Art History from Central Connecticut State University and her Master's in Arts and American Studies with a concentration in museums and communities from Trinity College. Welcome and thank you, Bernadine.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be a juror, especially for such the art is so meaningful, especially in the space of your hospital. So thank you.
Well, I think we can start off with giving our congratulations to all of the winners, and we'll go through kind of each of them one by one, and Bernadine will speak to each artwork.
Thank you. But even before I go through each individual work, one of the things I did as I went through the hallway and went through all the objects. I didn't look at names or titles. I didn't want to know I didn't want to know if the artist was male or female. I really just wanted the work to speak for me. And so the show doesn't have a specific theme, so which was fun. So it allowed me to really just explore the aesthetic of each work. And this one is Soulful Bocce by Margaret Wilson. Margaret, welcome. And really drew me to this painting was, this idea of this very expressiveness of paint, and yet the details of the bocce ball, the figure, the facial expression, the gesture of the hand on the ball, it was just, and it's somewhat of a large painting. So I was wowed by it. And especially the person's expression and like that sense of like focus or concentration as seemingly as they're going to, pull their arm back to toss that bocce ball.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Very cool. Very cool. And again, I didn't look at titles until after I chose the work. So later I'm going to ask you too a little bit about like that title. It's Soulful, which was.
Okay.
Thank
you. Thank you.
Oh, so I think this captured is Alyssa. Oh, Alyssa, I see you. Hi, Alyssa. Oh, you're young.
Hello.
So she is so breathtakingly beautiful. This face, the contrast of this face, but you get lost in the universe of her hair. It was just breathtaking. Again, relatively smaller piece, but you're really drawn by the colors and the constellation of stars. And that kind of, those lines are just like liquid lines, it's like it's all one line going through. So I was just really drawn by her and loved her very much.
Oh, thank you.
You're really beautiful. Is Bernadette here? I don't see her. Bernadette's here, yes. So this piece, Glow, this is a relatively small landscape. And yet, so it really beckons you to get close up, which I did. And yet it seems monumental, even though it's very tiny, even though it's very small, very ethereal. You just fall into that whole, when I first looked at it, I went right into the sky, and it's just, again, it calms you, it kind of overtakes you, even though it's relatively very small. So I really love this piece too, Bernadette. And then the first, Margaret Wilson. I recognized her right away. It's Ruth Ginsburg. And again, this is a tiny little piece. And in the hallway of all the works, yeah. She could seemingly get lost in a way, just scale wise, but she doesn't get lost because of your extremely expressive lines.
Thank you.
Like there's somewhat of a frenzy almost, and yet you capture something about her for sure.
Thank you.
Maybe seeing the eyes. I love to know later too. I'm gonna ask all the artists different questions, but why that specific look? Maybe you saw in a photograph, I'm not sure. And I also too love that like red line that comes down to the side of her face, which was, and just a side note, I didn't know, again, because I didn't look at names, that when I told Wendy, this is why I like to rate the art of the works. I didn't realize that you did also Soulful Bocce. So in some ways, you're very obviously interested in face and portrait and figure, but they're very different too at the same time. I did not think it was from the same artist. I really thought I picked 4 different artists.
Yeah,
so it was wonderful. Yeah. So that's why I chose it. But ironically, I said to Wendy, it's interesting how what really drew her are the portraits. And I think that's sometimes for every juror, it's different, and why exhibitions change jurors, because everyone has their own sort of like what draws them in. So
right,
it's all beautiful. So thank you. I was so impressed just by the talent and the engagement from a community, hospital is really wonderful. Really nice.
Yeah, well, congratulations to all of our winners. Little Zoom round of applause, everybody. Wonderful job. So I now want to open the floor up to our winning artists. So I think Margaret and Alyssa are here to kind of speak a little bit about their piece, their process, their artwork. Feel free to tell us a little bit about yourself. Maybe you want to start with Margaret, our first place winner?
Sure. So basically, I worked, my original training is as an art therapist. And way back when, I've had several different professional lives. And most recently working in hospital administration. Well, actually, most recently painting full time. And I have been working on this series called Out of the Blue, which was prompted by a themed exhibition at the Gallery on the Green in Canton. And so I created 2, they're small, about 6 by 5 inch pieces for that show. And I got really the concept of out of the blue really grabbed me. And in terms of my process for all of the paintings in this series, right now there are about 120, is to start with line, and then sort of assert with a line, obliterate with color, and then excavate into the oil paint, into that paint, and dig out the line or lines underneath that overlay of oil paint, and then go back in and touch up. But Bernadine, in terms of your question about her expression, Ruth's expression, I did look at a photograph, but in the process, the photograph gets lost, and it's all about, basically, it's a cliche, but it's a little happy accident of like, what happened, like, that's the excitement for me, to see like what pops out, and accentuate that. So, and it's interesting, your comments about the soulful bocce. At the point in time, I was working very small and 6x5, and people kept saying to me, "Oh, you need to make them bigger. You know, people want big paintings. They don't want these little things. They work bigger, get bigger tools." And so that's that one. I think it's 18x22 or something like that. But the process was just not the same compared to working in a small, intimate space. But in terms of the tension and the intimacy of the smallness, but the actual process of line, covering, excavating was the same. But that basically, that's about it. Any questions for me? Or
I have a quick question. Was the bocce one framed in black? It was unframed, correct? Am I correct on the bocce painting?
it has a floating, it floats in a frame, so there's a black frame around it. Yeah.
You know, it's not from memory, only because the color's so. Oh, you're
Yeah.
right, but it gets lost compared to that color. And now,
Color.
yeah, and I thank you for describing your process. Now it makes sense a lot about the whole.
Right. So
excavating.
underneath all of that blue is red and yellow and orange and flesh. And in terms of the ball, initially I wanted it to be a crystal ball and was going to be having her foretell the future, but that didn't work out. So then I thought, well, she's playing bocce, or she could be. But anyway, thank you. Thank you. And I think, and thank you for thinking that they were done by different people.
I did. I really did. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
You're welcome. It's beautiful. Cool.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Margaret, for sharing all of that. It's always neat to hear from the artist perspective about their work.
Thank you, Holly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Alyssa, if you want to share a little bit about your piece.
Sure. I don't have any particular background in art. I'm actually an ICU nurse, and art has always been a big part of my life. Ever since I was a child, it's always been a good outlet for me to express myself, and whenever I'm feeling stressed or anxious, it's always been a really good outlet for me to kind of get myself back in center. Watercolor, this was done in watercolor. That's a relatively new medium for me. I've always worked with charcoal, graphite, mostly when I was younger, and then I kind of expanded into acrylics. And I always thought watercolor was very challenging. It's a bit unwieldy compared to acrylic. You don't have as much control over it. But I've learned that I like that now. I like that you let the water and the paint do its thing. You just let the process happen, and it comes out with such beautiful like blues and you can add salt to it and create all these different cool techniques. So it's one of my favorite mediums now. And I felt like it was the perfect way to do this piece. The title is "We're All Made of Stardust." I believe that's a quote from Carl Sagan. And it's true, when the universe was created, stars were formed and exploded, and we're all made of the same stuff, all the same carbon. And I think it's important to remember that, even in your darkest days, you're still a star. So I wanted her to have this like peaceful, beautiful expression, even in like the vast, like dark universe. Like, you're still a part of it, even when you still feel like insignificant. It's a part of you, you're a part of it. So that's kind of where I was going with this.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
I don't think Bernadine is on the line. Correct me if I'm wrong. Or Bernadette, I'm sorry. No, I don't think so. All right. Well, no worries. Thank you, Margaret and Alyssa, for sharing. Now I just want to open up the floor to everybody here. If you have any questions for Bernadine, for Margaret, or for Alyssa, or you have any questions about the Joy of Art program, I'll give you a second. Feel free to unmute yourself and make any comments or ask any questions.
I had a question, I believe of Margaret.
Sure.
So it's all very interesting and really enjoy listening to you both and seeing your art. But for you, Margaret, I wonder what your attachment or your process to the smaller pieces is. And I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but I dabble a little bit, and I'm always, it's interesting what you said, people saying, oh, do it bigger. And, I have a tendency to think, oh, I should do it, I should do it bigger. So I am very interested in your thoughts in what draws you to the smaller.
Great question. A couple of things. One, the first thing is that I have a large board about 3 feet by 2.5 by 3 feet or whatever. And these small pieces are tacked, usually 6 at a time on that board, so that I'm working at 4 to 6 pieces simultaneously.
Yes, right.
So that's part of it for me, to be able to move from one to the other very quickly. You can usually tell when I've used up all of my blue, certain color blues oil paints, because I'm really cheap about use of paint. But in terms of trying to answer your question, it's more about the intimacy of the space, where the tension between both line and form and color is so much more exaggerated than in a larger field. And then part of it is the control to be in a small space, getting the mark right, getting the gesture right, as opposed to something larger. And it's just a different language. I keep returning to the smallness of these works. And recently I feel like I'm getting more validation for the size. And that's encouraging.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
You certainly did.
Okay.
So yes, my takeaway is the control in tension and the intimacy.
Intimate, correct. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, great question.
Margaret, I like how you can jump around also to different pieces too.
Yes, it's it's very fun. So that you in this particular where the series the pieces that Ruth is from, there's a piece of I started with I was toying with powerful women, and not toying with them, but that was what I was thinking about. And I did a piece of my mother. So before Ruth, I did my mother. So my mother and Ruth's portraits have very similar colors and lines. And I was challenged by someone who said to me, well, you've done your mother, now let's see if you can do RGB. And I said, I'll give it a try. So.
Interesting.
Well, you did a great job. You got first place with it.
Thank you. Wow, it's really, thank you so much. It's really a total pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's so interesting that you were challenged that way. But even to kind of dovetail a little bit what you were just saying, Margaret, to Judy, you're right. There is something about the intimacy. I'm telling you, and the expression on her face, and even from a distance, I zoned right in. Yeah,
right. Yeah, she does. She draws you in, and I can't. I mean, it's kind of corny, but that was not intentional. It just happened during the process. And similarly with my mother's little portrait, she draws you in as well. So yeah, thank you. Thanks.
I actually have a question for Bernadine. If you don't mind sharing, every juror, when we have them come in, they have sort of their own things that they look for, their own process when they come in and judge the pieces. Do you have any things that you look for, or is it more about how the pieces speak to you?
That's a really good question. So, especially since this wasn't a themed, because I was a juror for a show not too long ago with the themes around women's rights. So it was a larger show, and works were submitted. So I had that like in my mind, as a kind of a backdrop. But for this, in some ways, this was a lot of fun because it became more about my experience as a spectator walking in and what's drawing me. Even though I looked at everything, what is drawing me in, And I really do like portraiture and figures. So that's a side note, but yeah, so it was a lot about getting in the space between myself and the work, and how does that kind of speak to me? What do I notice? Even if I have some context with art history and story of art, still for me is, and then some of it draws emotions, Ruth definitely did. Alyssa, your work certainly did too, with the constellations and the bocce too. I was so curious, like, who is this person? There was, the expression and all that. So that's why I think in some ways this was so fun in that sense. So that's the approach I took when I'm like, and then also too, when you start to hear about like the mission of this hospital. And I heard this later after I made the choices. Wendy said, patients sometimes, some of the work goes into their rooms. I didn't realize that. And it sits there for them. And how wonderful is that? I mean, she said, they're not just looking at, this sort of, hospital art, so this is, and it's so community driven too. So, but long story short, that was sort of and that made it so much fun too. I have a quick question. Like, can like the artists bring their families? Is it really no one can just walk in and look at the show? I'm not clear about. Like, if I want to come and bring people, can I bring people to the show?
So unfortunately, no, we have to be closed to the public. I wish, we keep saying maybe next show, maybe next show. I wish we could. I know that's such a huge part of the experience, but unfortunately, in order to keep all of our staff and our patients safe as possible during, COVID, we keeping it limit on who comes in. But of course, we have all of the pieces up online, so everybody can take a look virtually. And there's still, I know we can't have, community members coming in, but there's still a lot of people that come in and out of our hospital, yes, the patients, but also their families, the people who are visiting them. We have a large group of volunteers who do work at a hospital that are coming in. And, where the hallway is, it's in our outpatient area. So we have a lot of therapists and patients who are coming through that hallway, and they use that hallway for their therapy. And oftentimes people are pointing out like, oh, see that painting over there with the flowers? We're going to get you to walk over there. And, you know, it helps motivate them through even just their, you know, daily therapy sessions. So it's still very much appreciated.
I also, so the curation of the show, like the choices of where each piece went, who makes those who made those choices? Is it you and Olivia?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Sometimes we have some of our volunteers help us hanging too, but yep, that was us.
Nice.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions for any of the artists, Juror?
I have another quick question if I could. It's for Alyssa. I was thinking about what you were saying before. So you said you work in intensive care.
Yeah, so I worked as a nurse in Phoenix, Arizona
Oh,
for about 7 years. I worked in the surgical trauma intensive care unit there.
wow.
Then I moved back to Connecticut and gave birth to my triplet daughters. And I've been
Oh my
home with
goodness.
them for the past 2 years, and I'm going back to work next month. I'll be
Wow.
in the NICU at Yale, where they were born, actually. So,
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
yeah.
That's quite something. Well, I'm interested in your, I see some of the context. I'm interested in your entry into art. So can you maybe say a little bit more? I'm just always so interested in how, you know, what was the crossover or the bridge for you?
As long as I can remember, I've always been very creative. I loved arts and crafts, anything. I have had many, many people tell me I should have gone to art school, and I do love art. I'm not sure that I could turn it into a job, a career. I was too nervous of becoming a starving artist. So I decided to follow a different passion of mine, and that was, you know, helping people heal
Right.
through nursing. And I feel that, you know, I can also do a lot of good through art and you know, therapeutic healing, either by people looking at my art or helping other people. You know, show their creative side. I have volunteered with kids, doing art classes for them. So it's a big part of my life, although it's not my career choice.
Mhm.
I do a lot of commissioned portraits of pets and people and houses and all sorts of different things. I just got commissioned for a playground painting, which was kind of unusual, but it was fun to do.
Oh, very interesting. That's
Yeah.
great. And do you work mainly in watercolor? Or I do remember you saying that maybe it was new for you,
Yes,
or
I would say watercolor I just got into maybe the past couple years, and I mainly use watercolors now. I do dabble in some gouache. Occasionally I'll break out the acrylics, but it's mostly watercolor and gouache that have been speaking to me recently. So,
great. Thank you.
I have a question for both Alyssa and Margaret. Maybe Alyssa first. How did you find out about the show? How did you know enough to enter into it?
Olivia Reed is one of my mom friends. Our
Okay,
kids like to play together, so she knows that I like to paint and has seen my paintings before, and she really encouraged me. This is my first art show I've ever submitted to.
great.
And I I didn't feel that I was good enough to do it, so I'm really happy that she encouraged me.
Super. Margaret, how about you?
A neighbor of ours, who, you know, I'm not sure his role at the hospital, Mark Galletti, it was encouraging me to submit. He had encouraged me to submit back at the point in time when there was a photography show That obviously didn't work. But so I kept my eyes and ears open. And my husband saw an article in the New Britain Herald,
Oh,
which prompted my entry.
Oh, great,
So-
thank you.
great.
Yeah, thank you both. I'm so glad we had both of you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right, well, if there are no more questions, that pretty much concludes our show. Congratulations again to all of our winners. And thank you to everybody who submitted to our show. Again, as Olivia was saying earlier, it's a huge part of the healing, creating a healing environment at the hospital. And we hear all the time about how much of a difference it makes and how much people enjoy it. Every time they see us hanging up their new work, they're so excited about it because it really does help create a more positive environment, especially for our patients who have such complex needs and who might be there longer than in a regular acute care hospital. So it helps have their healing journey be a little bit more positive. So thank you all so much. Make sure to check out all of the works on our website. So it's joyofart.givesmart.com. I made sure to type it into the chat so you can pull it up there. That will be open through January 6th, I believe. So feel free to take a look anytime. Most of the pieces I think are for sale. So if you're interested in purchasing, you can purchase the pieces right online. And if you do have any inquiries about prints and if artists have those available, just feel free to contact us, me or Olivia, and we'll help coordinate that with you. You can also donate to the Joy of Art program, which supports community programming, art programming for our patients, and also helps us put on these exhibits throughout the year. You can do that also at joyofart.givesmart.com, and we really appreciate your support. Thank you again, Bernadine, for being here with us today. I think you brought a really unique perspective, so we really appreciate that. And thank you again to all of our committee members who make this happen.
Can I say one more thing too? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
So I spoke to Olivia about this earlier. So as it was announced in the beginning, I do have a podcast on that I do a lot of interviews with women artists, and I want to offer that to you, Alyssa and Margaret, if you'd like to be on my show, because your work is so beautiful. So Olivia can give you my email address. You can contact me. I'm sorry, I got a little emotional because your work is really, and your stories, now that I hear your stories, it's really nice. It's just, I love to hear artist stories and what brings them to work. So I'm offering
Thank
that.
you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's an amazing opportunity. Thank you so much. Yeah, everyone make sure to go check out her podcast.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, should I just leave?
All right. Well, thank you guys all for
Thank
being
you.
here, and we hope you have a wonderful night.
Yeah, good night. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Night.